the Ringmaster was originally supposed to be, when I look back at some of those prototype drawings of it, this cool symmetrical, outfit, and he was, the master of the ring, this technician. I was more of a romp 'em, stomp 'em. I could wrestle technical, but I wasn't that kind of guy as far as ring gear goes. I was pretty basic, boots, some boots, some knee pads, and some trunks. And they had this pretty design, and the Ringmaster didn't work. There was no je ne sais quoi to that. You ain't gonna look.
Was that one out of Flying Brian's dictionary? Did you?
Yeah. when you see that, I knew that name didn't have no marquee value to it. Ringmaster. Now all of a sudden, I'll never forget having a conversation with Razor Ramon. It was Scott Hall, and I was just starting the Stone Cold thing, and he goes, "So what's with the Stone Cold thing, man? What's that all about?" He's pretty cool. I love that guy. He's really knowledgeable about the wrestling business. I said, "Oh man, just a name change, but it'll work." And man, I'll never forget. We started doing that, and
What year was this when you began?
96, back in '96. Wow. And I started getting some promo opportunities and some chances to do a little bit of color. And this is important to that Stone Cold development. Because I wasn't there yet. You don't just come up with a name and you're there. It's developing.
Right.
I don't think anybody here develops into a great race car driver overnight, right? So I noticed this was a period of business when there was a little bit of a lull. So we'd do Monday Night Raw live one night, and then we'd film the next one the next week, and it'd go to post-production. And then they'd play it the next week, and even though we'd filmed it the week before, because you couldn't afford to just do 2 live nights. Mm-hmm. And so I noticed when I was watching that show that went to post, they were starting to edit a lot of the stuff I said out of the show. And I'd be at home watching, or I'd just catch a replay of the broadcast on the VCR. I was like, "Hey, man, I said this then," and they cut it out. So I remember we was up TV as in Lowell, Massachusetts, or Worcester, something like that. And I seen Vince walking across the parking lot into the building. And I said, I didn't know Vince very well. I'd been there 6, 7, 8 months, but I didn't really know him that well. And I said, "But you got to take control of your career at some point." So I said, "Hey, Vince," I said, "you got a second?" And I didn't put a whole lot of bass in my voice. I was like, "Hey!"
Yeah.
Hey,
Did
get
you
your
water
ass
yourself
over
up?
here.
Get that sheen on first.
I said, "Hey, man," he goes, "Sure, Steve." And I said, "Hey, man, I noticed when I'm watching the show back from Post, I said, you guys are starting to edit a lot of things I'm saying." I said, "I wonder why that is." Okay, remember I was supposed to be a bad guy? He goes, "Quite frankly, Steve," he goes, "you're popping a lot of guys in the truck." And what he means by that, when you pop the guys in the truck, that's production truck. Those guys have seen and heard everything. So if I'm eliciting a response from them and they're laughing their ass off, or so much trash, that I was spewing, it's entertaining those guys. And so that's a good thing. But because it was getting that kind of reaction out of him, he wanted it to be cut out because I was trying to be hated. That was my version of South Texas trash.
Yeah.
And I looked at him right there, and I told him, I said, "Vince," I said, "you got guys here 6'10", 7 feet, 300, 320 pounds. I said, I'm 6'1", 250, black trunks, black boots, bald head, goatee. I said, if you don't give me my personality, I can't compete. But if you give me my personality," I said, "I can compete with anybody you got." And he goes, "Okay, Steve." And that's when he stopped editing me, and that's when he let that South Texas trash fly, and that's when we started heating up, and I really found myself.
Was that when you weren't a heel anymore?
Well, I was still a heel. I was a trash-talking heel, and there was a version of me, really, if you go back to superstar Billy Graham, because Billy Graham was a heel, but he was becoming so entertaining, people started liking him. And then, Bob Backlund beat him for the championship, and Billy Graham was gone, and I think it kind of really affected him. But I was a heel still then, but the business was changing. And due to the roster of guys we had, and we had some great guys, times were changing. And I was talking so much trash. Brian Pillman had just came into the WWF at the time, and I'd go out there and I'd be working with babyfaces, and I'd come back from the match, and he'd be waiting for me, and he goes, "God dang, kid, you're a babyface." And I'd say, "F you, I'm a heel." But I was getting those kind of cheers.
Right.
So Vince had the forethought to, hey, you know what? At the time, Bret Hart had been around so long, and he's one of my favorites. And he said, Bret's kind of starting to complain a little bit, and people were starting to boo him. So he had this big idea to put us in a match in WrestleMania 13. And what we did was go out there. When I went out there, I was pretty much universally received as a heel, but there was a lot of positive response. I got a lot of pops.
Yeah.
When Brett came out, a lot of pops, some boos. Ken Shamrock, special referee. We went out there and executed one of the rarest things you can do in a professional wrestling match, which is a double turn.
Oh.
By the end of that match,
Like that?
I had went from a heel to a baby. He went from a baby to a heel.
Wow.
Now understand, nothing happens overnight. There was still work
Sure.
to be done on the back end to further, those paths. But that was
That was when
probably
it happened.
That was the match that really made and launched my career, and I've given Bret Hart so much credit for that because he handpicked me a year earlier to work with him when he's making a comeback from a knee injury. But
Yeah.
it was that story, and that's
crazy.
when I started becoming the baby face or the good guy. And I've always preferred working heel because
I was going to ask you that.
it's so much more comfortable. You could do anything. I mean, and it's kind of fun to make people hate you.
Yeah.
It's easier to make people hate you than it's like you, I think.
Right.
And like if you trip on a stair or the ropes getting in the ring as a babyface, as a good guy, you got egg on your face.
Yeah.
If you trip as a heel, the worst they can do is laugh at you and you say, hey, F you, I tried to do that.
Right.
There's more creative freedom in being a heel.
That's interesting.
I always found that interesting too. I was watching videos of like Jake the Snake, and then also like Honky Tonk Man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and I realized that I think they preferred being a heel, and I always wondered that why that preference. And now you're just answering it, the creative freedom. But ultimately, do you become champion? Do you become the champion in of the long play, the long time champion as a heel?
No. I became the really as a babyface.
No, I'm saying in general though. Is that like if people prefer being a heel? What's the?
I think it's all personal. There's a lot of people love being a good guy. Right?
Okay,
Babyface,
okay.
we'd say. I mean, and you look at Hulk Hogan, one of the greatest of all time. Until he went NWO, he was a babyface his entire life. One of the biggest draws in history of the business. So yeah, it's all preference. And, well, here's the thing: by the time I had turned babyface and become so successful at that, people had kind of forgot about that kind of 2-year heel run, and I was effective as a heel. But I became so beloved as that babyface. When we went to WrestleMania 17, Vince always likes to do something special. And I was working with The Rock, and we set a new Astrodome attendance record on that pay-per-view. And I said, hell, man, well, after the match, why don't I turn heel? And so I did turn heel. But it was kind of like, as Jim Ross would put it, you never want to see John Wayne as the bad guy.
Right.
That's how beloved he was. By the time, I'd become a version of John Wayne. People didn't want to hate me. But I just wanted to do it because I love being a heel. I thought it'd be great for the business.
Even when you tried to turn heel, you couldn't.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
We
That's
tried
right.
for a long time, but it wasn't a good idea
Yeah.
from a business standpoint. And people wanted to love me. They wanted to cheer for me. They wanted to have a good time with me, drink
Damn
beer,
right.
and raise hell.
Yeah, that's right. You were one of a kind, so nobody wanted to see you change. Describe. So for me, there's certainly different eras where the sport peaked. What's the difference between your era? It don't even seem like you retired that long ago. 2003, I guess, is a long time ago, but it doesn't seem like it. But describe the peak, which was a huge, huge era for wrestling in your prime, to what we have now.
Well, I think if you look at the peak, it was when Eric Bischoff went down to WCW working for Ted Turner, and they decided, hey, man, WWF at the time, they got it Monday Night Raw. Well, why don't we go head to head? And because Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, some of those guys have migrated down there. He goes, why don't we go head to head with them? And man, that was the Monday Night Wars. And man, we was throwing everything but the kitchen sink every single Monday night.
Yeah.
You were getting a main event pay-per-view type card because it was a war.
Yeah.
And they kicked our ass for 2 years. And then finally we started spinning up. I got hot. Here comes The Rock. Taker reinvented himself. DX comes along. Mick Foley heating up. I mean, all of a sudden all our irons started heating up. And I was leading the charge. I keep it on the DL, but I was leading the charge.
you for
I
sure
heated
was.
up. And, man, once we started beating them, we never looked back. And then, hell, Vince ended up buying the whole company for pennies on the dollar. And, okay, now go to now, put Ted Turner out of business. There's a new organization, AEW, just started. But right here and now, man, there ain't no competition. So how good are you without competition?
Yeah.
100%.
I love competition, and so WCW, I mean, they made us work our ass off to try to get to number one, and then it's one thing when you get to number one, but you got to stay there. So we still in a dogfight until they shut them down. So I just think that was still the last days of the Wild Wild West, and I love has something to do like introducing a restrictor plate. Guys starting to be a little bit more micromanaged. Things had to get a little bit more of a friendly tone. A lot more corporate sponsors coming in, and I'll never forget when I had to leave in 2000 to get my C3-4 fused up because I had some neck injuries. And when I came back, that's kind of when every now and then they start handing you something like this, and this is what you were going to say. Hey, man, before that, what I was going to say was if you're going to talk some trash to me, I'm going to listen to you talk that trash, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to answer everything you just said. And we're tearing each other down, but we're building each other up. And we're working together, right? We're trying to sell tickets. It's business. And I don't work from memory. I work from what I feel in my heart, my gut, and then put it together with my brain.
Who was giving you that? Like when you came back and they were trying to script what you say, who is that?
Writers,
Just like with WWE?
Yeah.
Okay, so they started trying to write, and what does it look like when Steve Austin doesn't like what you're trying to make him say? What do you say?
Well, just it's hard to me. It's hard for someone to try to write. You weren't in South Texas. You weren't hauling hay. You didn't have a hard time making it and everything. You didn't have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. So I don't know if you can achieve the attitude of the mindset or, hell, after 7.5 years of paying my dues, finally I'd become an overnight sensation. Well, you wasn't there them 7.5 years when I was living on potatoes, piddling with my pocket knife in a hotel room, struggling to put some damn car in my, some gas in my car. So I don't think you could really encapsulate, what I would say, or you might know who I was by looking at me, but if you ain't been in the grind with me, I think it's hard for me for anybody to write for me, and it's hard for me to feel what you may write for me.
Would you just say I'm not saying that?
Well, I work with the system. I'll never forget one time we was at a building, and someone came and found me, and I was working a program with Vince, and he said, "Hey, Vince wants to go the promo with you," and I said, "All right," and I remember we was in this little bitty room, smaller than this table, half the size of this table.
A lot of things are smaller than this table.
I mean, but me and Vince. And I'm sitting there, okay. I'd come back from my neck injury, like, okay, Vince, I'm going to rip you to shreds. And he got mad at me. He goes, damn it, Steve, give me your A promo. I said, hey, man, I'm going to give you my A promo out there.
Yeah.
I'm not a rehearsal guy.
Right.
I said, so it just, I'll read you bullet points. I'm going to get a couple of them in there, and then we're going to fly.
That's pretty awesome. So you said you retired in 2003. You had a lot of time to think about it. What do you miss?
These days, I don't miss anything because I've been away from it long enough.
Right.
But when I had to, I had to pull the plug on myself. And when I got dropped on my head, I bruised my spinal cord. And there's a lot of neurological issues that I still deal with. And it just got to a point where I was running hard on a personal level, and then I would beat to shreds because I wasn't taking no time off. And it's a hard life.
Yeah.
And I tell people these days, hell, if I'd been using some modern training techniques or been drinking protein powder rather than whiskey and beer, like I said, but I was a pro wrestler, man. That's all I wanted to be, and I was at a high level. And I'll never forget when I pulled the plug on myself, getting out of the business. It was a hard transition for me, and I've seen a lot of guys get strung out on pain pills. A lot of guys get in IRS trouble or whatever. And I'm no smarter than a lot of the guys. When I got out, I didn't really have an exit strategy, and because I had such a hard time dealing with the fact that I was out of the business because I'd gotten pile drived on my head, and for 60 seconds I was a transit quadriplegic. And when you're laying there in the middle of a ring in front of 20,000 people live on a pay-per-view and you can't move, it scared the shit out of you.
Yeah.
And I was able to finally crawl. There's footage on TV. It was a rough day at the office. I went around all the damn United States seeing all these different doctors, and finally found a doctor, one of the leading researchers about quadriplegia, Joseph Torg in Philadelphia, and he didn't know the business was work. And I said, hey, Doc, I said, I ain't got to take a pile driver every night. He goes, oh, you can control what you do out there? I said, yeah, to a degree. I can control everything. So he cleared me to get back in the ring. Anyway, so I made it another couple of years, and I got fused up. I had to ride off in the sunset. But dealing with that, walking away, retirement always sounds like the R word.
Yeah.
Always sounds like the Holy Grail. You work your ass off because that's what we're here to do. And then you enjoy retirement. Hell, I retired when I was 38, man. You know how much money I left on the table? I mean,
Right.
not just about the money, it's about the good times, being with the boys, traveling down the road, being in front of a crowd, getting that adrenaline rush. That's what I lived and breathed. And so I didn't handle it well. And for about 3 years, I drank, I hunted, and I fished and just did a lot of stupid stuff. And one morning I woke up and I went in the bathroom and I just looked at myself in the mirror. It's a true story. And I didn't say this out loud, but I was thinking to myself, dude, the things you're doing are not conducive to living a long life. You need to slow your ass down, and you need to use, I didn't have any designs on being a movie star, nothing like that, but I was driving a forklift before I got in the wrestling business, and as much fun as that was, and I loved it, after being on top of the world in the wrestling business, I didn't want to drive a forklift again. I said, you better get your ass down there to Los Angeles and try to do something in the entertainment business and do that. And so, hell, I packed up and moved in with Diamond Dallas Page down there in
Wow.
in Los Angeles. Wasted about a year out there, still, searching for the bottom of a lot of bottles.
Yep.
And we found some people and started making some, I call them low-budget movies. Someone with a big ego would call them independents.
Yeah.
Hey, low budget.
Yeah.
And, man, I got a chance to host a reality series called Tough Enough for WWE. They reinvented it on USA Network. And they said, hey, man, we want you to host this show. And I said, I love it because when I first retired, I was so upset that I had to leave the business that I loved. I had to be completely away from it. I couldn't even watch it. I didn't want nothing to do with it. If I can't be the main guy, I don't want to be any guy anywhere around.
Right.
All those years later, in 2000, I think it was 2009 or 2011, when they did Tough Enough, I had been away long enough, the wounds had healed, and I wanted to be closer to the business. I didn't want to be taking bumps, but I wanted to help people learn the trade. So that put me back in touch with the business in a position that I really loved. And after one season, they yanked it, and it did good numbers. But that helped me out a whole lot. And then when I found that, a couple other people contacted me, and the last show I did was Broken Skull Challenge.
Right.
And some rocket scientists canceled that sumbitch, and I still ain't figured that one out right. But I found out that I really enjoyed, and through my podcast, talking to people and shooting the breeze on the fly.